All right, welcome to session 2 of the 2023 spring version of the mini conference. We have a mini conference every semester. Well, for the past 4 semesters, we've had a mini conference, and I don't see that we're going to be changing that pattern next semester. So welcome, we're grateful you're here. The title for this section is Hope, Renewal, and Rights. So there will be discussion with the presenters, and then we'll have some discussion with you all, and maybe this time, because the tech is working better, we can do the breakout rooms, and there can be a closer discussion with one of the presenters in the room, and they'll switch rooms, and it'll be awesome. It would just, Leo and I always know that whatever it is, it's going to be awesome. So welcome. Please get comfortable. Some of the things are a bit uncomfortable, but we'll try to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And there's a somatic grounding. Do I have the ability to do that, Leo, or do you need to do that?
If you would like to, go for it.
Well, I don't. Well, you have a specifically. I'll give it a try.
All right.
Prepare yourselves. Okay. Please close your eyes and get comfortable in your chair. Kind of maybe wiggle some of the tension out of your neck and your shoulders and the middle part of your body and your feet and legs. So imagine that we're in a darkened room, and all of a sudden there is a small ball of light that enters that space. And it's small, but it seems to illuminate everything. But as it grows larger and larger, the light increases and increases. And you may think that I've never seen such brightness, having been spending time in the darkness. And it might even be a bit frightening. But we're going to hold that brightness, the darkness in the background, but the brilliant light shining in the foreground. And sit with that. What does that bring to your mind? What does that light mean for you? What need do we have individually for a light shining in the darkness, of a learning experience, or of feeling encompassed, warmly encompassed by that light, in a place where the darkness would bring fear? How do we bring that into the way we think about ourselves and our bodies? How do we bring that into how we think about other people who also have bodies and also have access to different kinds of light, perhaps? How does that light enter into our soul almost? What does that light bring with it? Does it bring peace? Does it bring love? Does it bring things wished for but previously forgotten? How do we see and be within the light of the everyday, the light of the moment, the light that starts small and perhaps stays that way. How do we hold on to that smallness and have deep gratitude, perhaps even for the smallness? So as you're thinking about light, the light of the body, the eyes is the light of the soul, the light that comes from, that emanates from people that we meet, the goodness that is there, perhaps not spoken, but we know it's there, and that is also within ourselves. So let's take maybe just a minute and imagine it as you imagine it, and think of it as you think of it. Also think of it as how we can carry that. How can we find the light? How can we search for it and find it and find peace to our souls? So when you're ready, open your eyes and shake your shoulders out or whatever you need for the next session. This conference. All right. Thank you. So our first presenter will be Linda Small. And so we'll turn the screen or do you need do you have slides, Linda? Okay. So Linda Small.
Thank you, Patricia. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Patricia, for that lovely grounding and getting us in the space together.
If I might, though, you deserve a full introduction for the fullness of who you are, because you're kind of a rock star.
Why, thank you, Leo.
Please, if I could just interject momentarily, because I have to.
Yeah,
I have
you
to.
have it written up.
Oh yes, we are three panelists today, and the first of which is Linda Small, who is the aforementioned rock star, who is a project coordinator for Maine Prisoner Advocacy Coalition, who is the founder and executive director of Reentry Sisters, a reentry support organization specializing in a gender-responsive and trauma-informed approach for women serving Maine and beyond. Linda serves on the New England Commission for the Future of Higher Education in Prison through the Educational Justice Institute at MIT. Like I said, kind of rock star. She is a woman transcending fellow at Columbia University, focusing on the impact of the carceral state on women and girls. The fellowship fosters the growth of women's leadership in the movement to end mass incarceration. She is a member of the Justice Scholars Network, helping formerly and currently incarcerated students achieve their educational goals. And Linda is also a program facilitator for book and film groups for the Maine Humanities Council, a social justice fellow at the University of Southern Maine, and a DJ of all things for Justice Radio, a talk show on the Maine radio station WMPG about the carceral state. And following her is another incredible human being who I have the blessing to know, and who is right there, Miss Victoria Scott. Welcome. Who is a currently incarcerated justice studies student at the University of Maine, Augusta, who will be receiving her bachelor's in an interdisciplinary degree for soft infrastructural social engineering, which is a mouthful that I'm hardly educated enough to say, which is a self-designed major that blends justice studies and public policy, business administration, integrated sciences, and education. It is her intention to apply her education to the synergistic innovation of soft infrastructural social systems to create cohesive models that are self-sustaining. And I'm going to need a course just to understand that sentence. Victoria is also minoring in psychology and has received her paralegal certificate from the Blackstone Career Institute in April 2022. And in addition to her studies, Victoria serves as a teaching assistant to Dr. Lee Perlman of MIT, is a certified recovery coach and personal trainer, and wrote the academic reentry grant for UMA's Prison Education Partnership Advisory Board that was awarded $93,000 by the Davis Family Foundation. And then, wonder of wonders, I get to switch hats and join as a panelist myself. But for those who don't, I will go ahead and self-glorify for a moment and say that I'm an incoming PhD student at the Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution. My education and work are based in trauma-informed, healing-centered restorative justice practices and are focused on social justice advocacy and activism with a vision toward a beautiful abolitionist future. Toward that end, I'm working as a visiting instructor at Colby College, co-teaching AY 346, Carcerality and Abolition. I'm a lead facilitator of Maine State Prison's Restorative Practices Steering Committee, serves on Colby College's Restorative Practices team, and I provide consultation to RJ practitioners in the US and abroad. I'm a core organizer of the Carter School Working Group on Forgiveness and Reconciliation, creating spaces of co-learning, growth, and trauma healing in the context of forgiveness and reconciliation. And just to put a little cherry on top, I'm a columnist for the publication The Bollard, formerly Mainer, where I write a monthly column to raise public consciousness around the existence and power of humanity in carceral spaces. And so, since I get to be a little bit of this rockstar panel today, I'd like to pass the mic to Miss Linda Small.
Thank you, Leo. It's such an honor to be among such brilliance today, not just this panel, but all the panels throughout today. So thank you very much for having me. So our session encompasses hope, renewal, and rights. And as I prepared for today, I thought about how these three words are connected and why choose hope, renewal, and rights. But before we get into their connection, I invite everyone to take a moment and think about what hope means to you. What comes to mind? And as you think about its meaning, note how it feels in the body. Perhaps a sensation or a visualized as light, or it lives in a particular place in the body. And you may wish to draw in a deep inhale as if you were drinking in that hopeful feeling into every cell in the body, and then softly let the breath go. And we'll visit the feeling of hope together. So I'm going to speak about connecting a thread between hope, renewal, and rights within carceral spaces and also the carceral state. And the carceral state lives beyond the prison industrial complex. The carceral state is an American way of life. And that's why prison reforms do not work, because the legal system is designed to work the way it currently does. And here's a few of the reasons why I think the carceral state touches all of us through American culture. We take little children, neglected and abused, who act out in school, and we send them to detention, then to juvenile centers, and on to adult prisons. And as we know, that's the school to prison pipeline. So how can we have a school to prison pipeline if society isn't a carceral state? We're talking about children and linking educational spaces with incarceration. We also criminalize the poor and the homeless when policy choices trap people in the legal system for engaging in activities to survive, like driving without a license or being forced to sleep outside. Maybe you're unable to pay your fine or your fees. And of course, there's an interconnection between family policing, welfare programs, and criminal law. So I interviewed a gentleman whose carceral path began at the tender age of 8, when George was sexually abused. And instead of being cared for by trusted adults in our schools and communities, he was sent to a concrete box, which began a lifelong sentence of stigma, shame, and oppression by the carceral state. These are a few of the reasons why the carceral state is an American way of life. One of the connecting threads for hope, renewal, and rights is that they are place-based ideas. And if we don't move the concepts of hope, renewal, and rights from states of being into physical spaces and places, they lose their meaning and effectiveness. And for the 79 million Americans with conviction histories who live outside a cell, that's 1 in 3 adult Americans, there is a need to experience place-based hope as returning citizens who are embraced, welcome, and supported by their communities in their places of worship, in an apartment building, a grocery store, or a park. And I've heard some disturbing stories from people being forced out or even chased out of some of these locations. Hope is also an office at a job interview that focuses on your current capabilities and skills and not one part of your past. So place-based hope requires the renewal of hearts and minds. And for system-impacted folks, part of the renewal of the mind is continuing your education and being welcomed on campus, which isn't always the case. So in Maine, we have a person who's teaching a college course who's system impacted, but it's not allowed to be on campus. So he can't physically be where he teaches. And students in the prison education program have applied to live on campus when they're transitioning out, but we're told no. So essentially, we're saying this place isn't for you. You don't belong here. And renewal is deeply rooted in belonging. Renewal includes you belong here in this place of worship, in this neighborhood, in this workspace. Place-based renewal becomes active citizenship and our ability to exercise our rights, such as to go to the place where your neighbors cast their vote and do the same, or submit your own name for office. And what about the right to housing and to live in a neighborhood and to create a place called home, or to go to a place to earn your living? Hope, renewal, and rights can be place-based agents of change and transformation. And renewed hope emerges in the being of relationship, right? That's relationship to self and others, but it's also relationship to places where you worship, live, go to work, go to school, and includes the renewal to exercise your right to occupy all third places in safety and welcome. Imagine, if you will, that hopeful feeling from earlier living in your body as we reflect on some questions about hope, renewal, and rights in our carceral state, which I sometimes call the carceral state of America. Just saying. The 8-year-old boy who was sexually abused. Where was George's hope for the future? Or the hope of protection by trusted adults around him in our schools and community? And does hope live in these places? If so, is hope only for some And why didn't we hold George and heal him through the renewal of his soul? Where are 8-year-old Black boys and other abused child's rights to be safe, loved, and cared for? And a young Black man can walk down the street and be shot and killed by our taxpayer dollars at work, which is not an idea, but a place without hope, renewal, and rights. So where is a young Black man's right to hope and renewal? And why don't we have diversionary programs instead of using mass incarceration as the sole resolution for social problems? Fear-based attitudes that lead to mass incarceration are void of hope, the belief in renewal, or the restoring of human rights for those who both experience harm and commit harm, which we could say is every human being on the planet. And the renewal of rights fosters hope for the 79 million Americans living outside of a cell and the 2 million living inside of a cell. But the renewal must be fostered in relationship and rooted in our collective purpose and grounded in place and space. Because there is no hope without renewal, and we cannot renew without hope. Even as system-impacted people work towards transformation and renewal, the hope of restored rights diminishes upon release. Due to the stigmatization and demonization of system-impacted people, they are locked out of the economy due to their conviction history. And often they are locked out of community and belonging. And for some, a conviction history is a sentence for lifelong unemployment, homelessness, instability, and in many states, the inability to participate in the political process. So do system-impacted people have the right to safe and affordable housing? Because even after renewal, hope will not acquire you a business or a home loan, or career, or fund your education, or even guarantee you a place to live. It requires place-based hope and renewed rights. So what can we do? We can uplift the voices of currently and formerly incarcerated brothers and sisters through conferences like these, through publications and performances like Abolition Night coming in Maine in May, a little shameless plug there. But we can also be vocal about intolerance in our neighborhoods, workplaces, and schools. And we can educate ourselves on legislation and write to our representatives about our point of view. And if we are in a position of power, we can hire or recommend system-impacted folks for work opportunities when they are otherwise qualified, and support them in rising into positions of power with. And if we own property, we can rent to system-impacted people and influence our colleagues to do the same. So we know 1 in 3 Americans have a conviction history, and the carceral flow is not slowing down, especially for women. And we will be 1 in 2 with conviction history here in the near future. So one hope we can take from this unjust system is as we reach this critical mass, we can leverage our talent pool and our purchasing power of justice-impacted people, because that is the reality of our economy, which means society can no longer afford to ignore us. So there are many ways to take action that are hopeful for an equitable society, that renew our hearts and minds to eliminate othering and help system-impacted people restore their rights to dignity, humanity, and fellowship. So I'll leave you with this quote from Desmond Tutu, which lives in the heart of every justice-impacted person. Hope is being able to see that there is light, despite all of the darkness. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Linda. Incredibly well done, as always. Very real, beautifully threaded together, and based in exactly where we are and how individual people, it doesn't matter where you are, there is something you can do, so you have no excuse. There's always something that we can do to transform the spaces we occupy into ones that become those of place-based hope. So thank you for that. It's Victoria.
Thank you. I feel so blessed to be here amongst friends, both old and new. And it is my honor to follow Miss Linda's mic drop of a speech that was beautiful and addressed so many of the harsh realities that we face when we attempt to string together concepts like hope, renewal, and rights. So what do you think of when you think of hope? For me, hope is the light inside that comes alive to seek life in the darkness of circumstance, much like the lovely quote that Linda shared. When I consider hope, I can't help but reminisce about reading Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which changed my mind and my life and was infinitely enlightening about how hope is a survival mechanism, how hope is required to look towards the potential for a brighter future when you're in the midst of suffering. In the concentration camps, many of the survivors embraced hope because it was all that they had left, and that was what they held on to. That was the only thing that brought them through that experience. And I think that many of us incarcerated people and people just out in the world can relate to that. It's hard not to give up. Hope is one of those all-powerful intangibles, isn't it? It's like just next door to faith, but it's a little something different. Hope isn't all butterflies, but the belief that things will transform, and from that beautifully ugly metamorphosis, that butterflies will emerge to spread their wings. That's a nice segue, right? From hope to renewal, because now we're in renewal territory. And being like the butterfly, hope brought my renewal. It wasn't simple magic, though. No, it never is. Not simple at all. Hope comes from joie de vivre, right? Just being happy to be alive and holding your gratitude and knowing that more to be grateful for is soon to follow, even if you feel like you're empty-handed in the moment. But renewal comes from hard work. That's where you roll up your sleeves. No, renewal is not a butterfly. It's more like a phoenix that's forged in the hellfires of adversity. That is hard won. That's when you take a personal look at your reflection and the reflection of the world around you, and you integrate the shadows into the light that you hope to be and the hope that you hope to offer to others. Renewal isn't all roses either. It's not just self-care, although part of it should be. Part of renewal is that transforming, rebuilding of yourself, the strengthening of what was broken before. One of my other favorite books is Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. And she tells us about our rights here in this story. And after your renewal, after you've held your hope, you remember your rights. And she says that you have the right to tell your story. You do not have the right to traumatize abusive people. If you look through the lens of compassion, you will find hurt and trauma there. And if you are the abused person, healing that hurt is not your responsibility, and exacerbating it is not your justified right. You have the right to walk away. You have the right to create boundaries and generate possibilities. And you have the right to ask for support from your friends and community. I think that those are all beautiful inherent human rights that are too often forgotten when one loses hope. But through hope and renewal, we start to remember these realities and to take ownership of that and to feel empowered by them. Personally, I think that we all have the right to be a better person, to make better choices, and to learn from our mistakes. We have the right to foster powerful changes in ourselves and in others. And these are the rights that we must fight personal battles to recognize, and rights we must protect from external forces that seek to remove the hope from our hearts. that we can transform our pain into power, and that we can use that to help others to do the same. Thank you.
Now, how in the world am I supposed to follow that? Oh, man. Thank you. See, and this is why I love being where I'm at. Not here physically. This sucks. But positionally with the Carter School, to be able to work with this team to organize an event like this, it was an absolute no-brainer. So all the compliment about picking speakers, now they pick themselves with the incredible work that they do, and the incredible people that they are. And I think that's an important distinction to make, is that we are not what we do, and we are each valuable for who we are. So let me just go ahead and throw that out there real quick. And that feels like a good place for me to start, because that's something that I never actually really knew, is that I am valuable for the person that I am. That's not something that we learn, and that's something that through my coming on 15 years of incarceration, I've found that if there is a through line between all of the lives of the people who are incarcerated, it is an experience of being devalued, of living a life that tells you that you are not enough, and that you may never be enough, no matter what you do. Where you've lived a life of what you do is who you are, and how much you do depends on how valuable you are to the people around you. And so for me, hope, renewal, and rights, I think about losing hope and my journey of wondering if I ever really had hope before my incarceration. Because as I've learned and grown and healed from the numerous and repeated and ongoing traumas of my childhood, I realize that the majority of people who are born Black, brown, indigenous, or otherwise colorly othered in this country, hope is a word, hope is a concept, hope is not a reality that you are allowed. I was thinking the other day, a couple of days ago, when I was counting on somebody to come through to hold space in a certain type of way, and they didn't show up. And my immediate reaction was, yeah, that's a privilege white people have. You don't have to show up. That is not a privilege I have ever had, and maybe ever will be able to lean into, of just being like, you know what? I don't have it in me today. I'm not feeling it. I'm not ready to show up. And I know it's not a colorized thing, but it is a colorized thing. And it's also a gendered thing, as I'm becoming progressively aware of, the more I interact with amazing people, amazing women like Linda and Victoria, of the disparities that exist, and of how my dear teacher friend has told me numerous times that women are the other minorities, right? And so there is a hopelessness that is built into this society. There is a hopelessness, going back to Linda's point about this being a carceral state, a carceral society through and through, is that carceral societies and this carceral state that we live in breeds hopelessness. It tells certain people who are born in certain places with certain skin colors and certain genders and certain sexes and certain everything else, just anything that you can slap a label on as certain, you are only allowed a certain measurement of hope. And that's a reality that if you have not experienced that, then that means that you have lived and grown and been protected by a level of privilege. And privilege in and of itself is not a bad thing. It is not a thing that you need to be shameful for walking around with, but it is a tool of power within the structure that exists that positions you in a way to be able to reach out and help those who don't know what hope is, who have not been able to experience it in the way that you've experienced it. And so that is the call that I try to put out everywhere that I go. And even though I'm sitting here incarcerated, stepping into a PhD program and being able to operate in the spheres that I do, it puts me in a position of relative privilege within this system where I'm an exception among the exceptions within a system, within a state and a prison that is an exception among the exceptions across this nation. And so as someone who is allowed to operate from this place of exceptionalism, it is my duty, it is my responsibility to open doors so it's not just me, so that I don't perpetuate this cycle of exceptionalism that says and allows people in power to be able to point to me and say, look, he did it, so that means you can do it too. When we all know, if you have lived in the system, if you have operated in any type of corporation, that that's just not true. Just because you can point at somebody and say, oh, look at them, they did it, you can too, that's a lie, right? So I keep going back to Martin Luther King and his quote about the cruel jest that is when you tell a bootless man to pull himself up by his bootstraps. Don't do it. It is vicious. It is one of the most vicious things that you can do to another human being, is to tell them when they have no boots on their feet, when they have no socks to wear in the wintertime, to pull themselves up by the bootstraps that don't exist in their lives and never have. And so it's from this place of hopelessness. It's this hopelessness that I see and that I feel everywhere I go throughout this facility, right? There are pockets of hope. There are pockets of hope within this system. And that is not an excuse to rest on our laurels. We can't point to that and say, look, there is this wonderful thing that's happening over here, so therefore we've done our job. We're not done. We can never be done. And so when we're looking at hope and we're looking at the ability and the positionality to be able to create opportunities for people to renew, to become new, to heal, to grow, to transform in ways that actually transform the conditions that led to their incarceration in the first place. That is our duty, that is our responsibility, right? Is that as we grow, as we heal, those of us who have lived through and experienced and created the darkness around us, co-created, should I say, because the darkness existed before us. The harm, the oppression, the marginalization existed before us. And yet, as we have experienced, as we have gone through this machine that is designed to chew us up and spit us out and then tell us it is our fault, as we heal and as we experience the inner workings of this machine, it is our duty to expose that. Be ruthless with the system and loving to those who operate within it. I'm quoting that from somebody. It's a misquote, but it's somebody else's quote, so I can't take that as mine. Look it up. Somebody look it up and throw it in the chat so I don't take that as my own. But the truth of it is real, and that is why I carry it. The system is harmful, it is toxic, and it is designed to kill people, to marginalize people, to oppress people, and to condition them to believe that it is that they have to oppress themselves, that we internalize this oppression and keep ourselves beaten down and broken in ways that we believe ourselves irreparable. And we live within these narratives that support that tell us you are not worthy, you are not valuable, you have nothing to offer this world, and therefore go sit in a cage and be thankful for the goodies that you get when you get them. And so as we renew, as we heal, as we come together, and as we open up these opportunities to be able to interact with people who are not in these spaces in ways that are loving, and to use that love and that community and that base that for me is grounded in where I first found hope, where I first was able to experience the hope of life, of something after what I was experiencing. For me, that hope was in God through Christ. I understand that that is not for everybody, that that is not where people live. But for me, I cannot tell my story without telling that piece of it, because that is where my healing began. And then as I stepped and started to be able to open up, to do enough healing, to engage with other people in a very real and vulnerable way, then that is what allowed me to be able to experience community. And it is the groundedness in that community that has created the renewal that for me has given a reestablishment of rights, an establishment of an understanding of the rights that I'm supposed to have as a human being, but that have been denied me from my birth, and that I'm not alone in. And it's that non-aloneness, right, that somehow keeps surprising people that, oh, I'm not alone in my pain. I'm not alone in my suffering. I'm not alone in the traumas that I have experienced, even though we live in a society that tells us that, oh, if you have experienced this in this certain type of way, you're alone. Be quiet, sit down, shut up, don't talk about it. The conspiracy of silence that we live within and that we uphold because we have been conditioned to do so until we have just come to this point of brokenness and just crushed it down to this, where we have to speak about it, where there is no strength left but to allow that to be exposed. And when we get to that point and then we realize we're not alone in our pain and our suffering and our trauma, then that is how we come out of it and step into our communities. And that is the responsibility that each of us has. If you have heard this message, if you have lived through this system, if you know somebody who has lived through this system, or you don't know somebody who has lived in this system, well, guess what? Now you do. So now the responsibility is also yours to be part of the solution of interrupting these cycles of harm. And that too is a right, regardless of how you are positioned. It is a responsibility. It is a right. It is a duty, and it is an honor if you choose to take up this call, to step in and create these places of hope, these experiences of hope. Step into the renewal, not that you're helping somebody else, but that you're walking with them in the renewal of their lives. Because nobody here is a savior for another person. The power exists within us. For me, it is placed there by God, but the power exists within us and within our communities in order to be able to heal and grow and renew and uphold and protect the rights of ourselves and those around us. And that if you find yourself in a position of privilege, then it is your duty to uphold the rights of others who cannot fight for themselves. Like Kyle before, who was speaking about uplifting directly the voices of currently incarcerated people, it is your job, it is your duty to uplift the voices of those who have been told that they must be voiceless and who live within a system that strips us of our voice. And when you have a chance to open up the door for somebody else's voice to be uplifted, do it. And so I will leave it there. That is your right, that is your responsibility, and it is not mine to give you, it is mine to point to you, to let you know that it currently exists in your life as someone who is interconnected with me through these walls and beyond these walls. Over them, scale them, under them, around them, and tear them down until they no longer exist, until we realize that they don't have to. We've been conditioned to believe that they have to exist, but they don't. We just haven't collectively been courageous enough to envision a future that does not include these cages that house continually and warehouse and oppress and crush generation after generation after generation. Let this be the beginning of the end of what exists. So I will actually leave it there and say thank you to each of you for showing up and stepping into this space, and to the women who have paved the way to make this possible. Because the men have gotten the credit, but the women have been the ones who have come before. They have been the ones who have shouldered this burden unfairly and unjustly and continue to do so. And so, with that, I will say thank you and open the floor for Patricia to lead us in some Q&A.
Right. All right. So you, okay, Leo, how do I just leave the screen as it is and people will raise their hand and I'll see them at the top of the queue? I've done this before, but I still need instruction to do this. All right. So there was a lot of beautiful explanations of the relationship with hope, renewal, and rights, and also the difficulty of those working together and the beauty of it when they do, when people step up, as Leo would say. So questions, comments, anybody? Well, I'll start and then you can follow me. Oh, okay, good. Lali. Lali? Lily, yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Question for our panel? You can't hear.
I have something.
Okay,
That was a beautiful choice of words. It takes a lot to bring me to tears, and I can't imagine being prouder or more inspired by a human being than to look through this computer screen and see you, who I've never met in person, Leo, and it takes connecting with someone like you. It takes connecting with people on the inside and hearing the words that only you can speak to recharge my batteries to go this the next day. I want to say thank you, and I look forward to the next one.
thank you, Kyle. Other questions? Don't be shy. Yes, Dan.
First of all, it was a pleasure, honor, and privilege to listen to the three of you speak. Your words were amazing. Now I have a question, and it's for all three of you. To those that say that, I can't remember the exact quote, but it says to sum it up, it's like they said, hope is the best of things and the worst of things. How have you all held that experience?
Go ahead and jump in if everybody else wants to speak. Oh, Linda, go ahead.
Yeah, that is such a good question, Dan. Such a good question, Dan. And I think some days I live right on that razor's edge where hope brings beauty and pain at the same time. And I think part of that is, there's when you're on the inside, it's a frightening thing to let go of hope. Right? That's what kept me moving forward every single day was the hope of one day walking out the door. But the pain of that was I wasn't taking everybody with me. And knowing that there are people who don't have that same hope. And so how do you generate hope for someone, especially when we don't have parole in Maine, who enters the system in midlife and gets a 40 or 50-year sentence, or right, a 75-year sentence, or whatever the case may be. And it might as well be life. They just don't call it that, right? But you can easily calculate those numbers. So that was a very painful, that was a love-hate relationship with hope. And now out here, I find that I have that same sort of love-hate relationship with hope. That might be kind of strong wording. Pain and beauty of hope. Maybe I prefer that. Because in the advocacy world for justice, it's always, one step forward and 3 steps back. And that's, you have to renew, you have to be very good at renewing hope almost on a daily. When I wake up, what's hopeful for me today? What is hopeful for my causes that I'm concerned about? What are hopeful for the people who I love? What's hopeful for my system impacted family? And there's always darkness within hope, right? There's this beautiful shining light, but there's also darkness. And I think being able to hold those at the same time is something that you learn. And I think you learn that through living through adversity. And I think anybody who has lived through adversity can relate to that in some form or fashion, depending on, your circumstances and how you like to frame that. But I think I don't think I see the worst and the best as separate. I think I see them as the same sides of a single coin, and that I carry those with me every single day. Thank you.
Beautifully put, Linda. I love that. I completely agree that the best and the worst of it is dual sides of the same coin. And thank you, Dan, for such an elegant and beautiful question, and for that great quote, because it's so true. The worst of hope is when life doesn't live up to those expectations, right? Is when you hope so hard and sometimes it's still not enough. Sometimes you fail. Sometimes your dreams crash. Sometimes other people don't hold up their end of the bargain, or they're not willing or outright resistant. And sometimes hope is a lot like banging your head against a wall. Hope is hard. And it's so difficult to hold because it's elusive, right? It's something that you have to find in every place and space that you can. But another thing that's beautiful about hope, which is the best of it, is that it's fluid. It moves and you can't exactly pin it down, and it's transferable. It's transferable interactively, like Leo said, in these connections that we have. When I lost a lot of my hope and my strength, I was fortunate enough to find people along my journey who offered me some of their hope and shared that with me, or helped lead me back to it when I thought that I'd never find it again. And that was a beautiful thing. And every time I'm brimming with hope and it's spilling all over the place, I try to pour it on somebody else that I see looking hopeless, because I know that they need it. I know that they need just a word of encouragement. They need just a shoulder. They need a little bit of strength. And if my hope has that for them, so that they know there's a sunrise tomorrow, and that there's another day, and then there's another moment in their beautiful life, whether or not it's painful, that's a great thing. And I'm really satisfied with that. Leo?
Yes, the best of things and the worst of things. The best of things is that that determined hope, that stubborn hope, that cosmopolitan hope that is a driver of change. I was driven by anger and rage and hurt and pain for the first number of years as I was flailing about trying to figure out where my place in the world was going to be after losing hope. But then as I grew in faith in my relationship with God, then that I came to realize, came to understand, came to learn that the only real sustainable driver of change can and must be love. And so the hope of change, the hope of life through love, that for me is the best of hope. And the worst of hope is when it's unrealistic hope. When I know that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I know that all things are possible. And yet, hope with expectation, right? Those who know me know that I live with all hope and no expectation, right? So I suppose the worst of hope is when you pair extreme hope, all hope, with expectation. Because when you pair hope with expectation, then you're setting yourself up for disappointment, at least me, disappointment and pain. And so all hope with no expectation is, and all love is the best of hope. And the worst of hope is when I lose myself in it and allow my hope to turn into expectation within a system that is designed to strip me of all of it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Lily and then Colonel. Lily? Lily?
Are you all right? Me? Oh, fuck yeah.
Lily, your mic's working.
Yeah.
I am Renewal, so. Oh, it's right. Why am I two? It's two of me over here. I don't know how that happened. Yeah, I want to say the comment. I said, thank you. I was tired and hopeless energy. The energy. I had no energy when I log on to this. I just want to say thank you for you guys lifting me up. You had to really restart my night for me. And I feel like I was meant to be here today, listen to you guys speak. I really do believe in that. I was meant to be here and listen, and why I heard you guys speak. And as you guys were speaking, I was trying to define my past relationships with hope. I'm like, did I use hope to hide my fears? You know, like did I use that okay, so hope to just as a bag of hope to just, yeah, if I'm afraid of something, if I'm whatever that is taking a step forward, or just putting it in there and saying, okay, let me hide my fear. But I'm beginning to understand, and you guys speaking even reinforce more that hope is not a place to hide my fear, but it's something to heal with. It's something to look forward to, And I just want to say thank you, and I don't say thank you enough. I don't think to you guys, and not just you three, but even other people on this call that I have relationships with. So thank you. Moments like this really brings that up. And Tori, will you be my tutor? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Lily. Colonel?
So thank you for everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm using a different setup than I usually use, so I'm not sure. But thank you for everybody's thoughts. And thank you especially for something that you said. I believe it was you, Victoria, when you talked about how hope is like next door to faith. And I've just been rolling that around in my head, and I think the two concepts also overlap with trust, because none of those have a guarantee. If it's a guarantee, it's not hope. If it's a guarantee, it's not faith. And if it's a guarantee, that's not trust. There's this component to it that you don't know. You are making a choice to side with the best possibilities of a situation or a person. And what I'm realizing is that, as was talked about in the previous session, there's just so much trauma. And it's hard. It was hard for me to recognize the trauma that I experienced until I had a mental health crisis. And then that was like, listen, you got to face this thing, and really acknowledge it. But I don't want everybody to experience a mental health crisis before they recognize that they've been impacted by trauma. And there are folks walking around who are oblivious to the trauma. And worse yet, they've been convinced that they have not ever experienced trauma. And that's rare. I mean, if you've ever met somebody who hasn't experienced trauma on some level, I'd like to meet this person, because that would be amazing to me. But I say all that to say that there, like this system that exists that perpetuates trauma, there are those who believe in this system. Like, they believe that not only is it, the best way, but the only way is to punish people and to inflict further trauma on them, as if somehow it evens out the scales. The whole picture of justice is this womanhood. I think the whole idea is erroneous. Like, it's a pretty picture, but it's not how life works. But still, you have people who genuinely believe, like, this is the only way to preserve society. This is the only way to make sure that bad people don't prey on good people, And so how do we show a different way to? And I'm glad that you all on this call aren't necessarily folks that I deal with on a regular basis, because they'd be like, how are you in the position you're in and you don't know the answer to that? Because I don't know everything. I know some things, and I've seen some ways work for some people, but then there's people like the people who really believe in the system as the only way. How, what are some ways we can reach them and show them that, in fact, there is another way, there is a better way. Like, we don't have to perpetuate trauma to preserve society, So I just love to hear anybody's ideas about that.
Renewal, thank you so much for everything that you said and for sharing your personal experience. Your vulnerability is such a strength, and it was so wonderful to hear that from you. As to people who are a little set in their way of thinking and have decided that this system works, maybe because they have to, maybe because they have to hope that something will, or maybe because they've lost hope and this is the resignation that they've made as a result in order to make themselves feel safe in some way, to cling to some semblance of safety in uncertain times when they themselves also don't have the answer. I really love that Einstein quote about how we can't solve problems with the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. And I think that that addresses the logical fallacy of incarceration so aptly, because if incarceration was in fact effective, it wouldn't be happening right now, right? And it wouldn't be happening at unprecedented rates. It would have served its purpose and corrected the human race entirely, and we wouldn't be so reliant on it. I think that on the spectrum of fear and love, fear often drives us into this state where we can't think our way through our problems. Our panic and defenses get triggered, and we have a hard time centering and deciding what's actually going to be effective rather than exacerbating the issue. And I think that the answer to incarceration and the answer to these systems that actually would be helpful for society are a lot of the efforts that I'm seeing right now. No, they aren't perfect, but there's hope in those efforts and there's progress. And many of the things that I and my colleagues and so many of other people are doing across the nation are making efforts to show what type of transformative experience is possible when hope and healing meet, and when that is met with love, and these networks are built and these human exchanges happen. I think that's vital for our communities, but I think that our communities also need to decide, do I want a good neighbor? Do I want someone who has healed, who has learned from their mistakes, who has something to offer my family, my community, our world? Or do I want someone who gets more and more broken every day and who lashes out because they can't process the overwhelming pain of their life trauma and experience? Thank you. And I also would like to meet whoever has not been traumatized, not once, because I bet they are glowing and floating, and that would be a very interesting conversation.
All right, thank you. Other questions?
And I'll also go back, if I can piggyback momentarily, that to change and disrupt the systems that exist goes back to the quote that was gifted to me, the answer of who actually said it earlier, Michael Brooks, right? To be kind to people, but ruthless to systems. I've found the most change comes through reframing the people who we have been conditioned to otherize, people who we have been conditioned to dehumanize as they have been conditioned to dehumanize us. That this system, these systems that we work within, are designed to separate and condition us to dehumanize each other. So as we other each other, the further the distance becomes. And when you, even from me, even from my disempowered state and my positional subterranean status, takes a step forward towards people who are positionally superior in this structural hierarchy that we live within, and choose to rehumanize them, to see them as full human beings. It's different. It opens up an opportunity for dialogue where before there was none. And so that for me is a step into relational power as a means of dismantling positional power, so that when I step into communication with anyone, regardless of their positionality, I see them as human beings. I deal with them as human beings. So I don't care who you are. I don't care what title you wear. I'm going to see you and address you and engage with you as a full human being. And I'm going to invite you to do the same for me. And if you are not at that point of being ready to do the same with me, then I'm going to love you anyway. I'm going to see you anyway. And that does not devalue myself. It does not mean that I do not respect myself. It does not mean that I do not expect and command respect. It just means that I acknowledge that you are not at a place of full humanity to be able to realize mine yet. And so it's from that position that I'm able to stand in peace, regardless of how I'm being faced, how I'm being addressed within this system. And so when you meet people who are in positions of power and you deal with them in that way, then they cannot unexperience that interaction. And it is those people who are in those positions of power who are able to initiate the change that I'm not positionally powerful enough to bring about, but that in those engagements I can sow those seeds, and maybe even occasionally with permission I can plant those seeds to allow that to grow and cultivate them over time, where I'm able to see the results years later. And that takes patience and endurance and community and people to support me along the way when I get my knees and my legs cut out from underneath me because I don't have the power to stop the blade from coming. But it's in these ways of taking a restorative approach to change, and in that way seeing restorative practice and restorative principles as inherently transformative, because I know and understand the power of restorative justice and restorative practices, and refuse to allow my restorative positioning in relation to the world to be co-opted by the systems that continue to try.
Thank you. Bernice, do you have a question?
No, I was just gonna like piggyback off of Leo, because I feel like with with the natural occurrences of how life goes, sometimes it's easy to forget how, the way you treat everybody around you is like a reflection of yourself. And it isn't until you're in like a situation where it's like, well, it seems as though it's like, it's not until that person is in a situation where it's like they really have nothing to lean back on. And that's where they kind of like realize that, like where they have to find the humanity in themselves. And then it's just like, that's the reflection of how they treat, other people. And I think I don't know how to like, what word to use, but I feel like on the other side of that, I feel like what's important is the fact that we are like humanizing ourselves in like our mistakes. And at the same time, I feel like in turn that humanizes other people one way or another. And oftentimes it's like when there's growing up, I always found that like when I was experiencing like dysfunction within myself or something I didn't like about myself, it would always like show in the way I treated other people. And the same thing would happen when, I would find something positive about myself, and that will also show in the way you treat other people. And I feel like that's also reflective in like systemic practices. It's a lot of times where it's like, I think personally, I feel like when the system is viewing somebody as a dysfunctional human being, they're not understanding that that is a reflection of the dysfunction that exists like in the system that they're living in. And I just like wanted to add that I feel like it's a weird way of like how, karma works out, like in the way it's like implemented like in everyday life. It's like the way you go about things is just a reflection of how you're treating yourself. And that's why it's always good to always like, practice restorative practices. And like, I'm learning now, well, I've always been learning this with the Carter School about like restorative justice. And oftentimes in like restorative justice is like always trying to get the person to reflect on themselves, even on the bad parts, even on the bad parts that you have. And that way it's just like, you're not necessarily perceiving yourself as a bad person, but you're just perceiving yourself as like a human being. And that way you're able to accept the mistakes that other people's make. And I feel like that is like, it's so, so, so important. And like, I feel like it's just so important. It's always going to be important, especially when, you know, when communicating and interacting with people who come from a different background, who, sorry, my thing about to die, who come from a different background, especially with people who have like been incarcerated or have caused harm. And like, it's just like, because in everyday life, you know, our human nature is to get caught up in our emotions, you know, like nobody is immune to that. But I feel like what is the hard part is recognizing that it's okay to be in those emotions. It's okay to feel them. And at the same time, it's like, because, you know, we get so caught up in emotions, and like our system is like programmed us to just keep going and keep going and keep going without, you know, stopping and like taking a moment to reflect. Even when it's like comes down to like conflict too, it in turn is, it's just like, it harms you, because it's like you're not telling the whole truth and you're not acknowledging the whole truth. And I feel like, you know, I really am thankful for this discussion today, because I feel like that's something that we're talking about right now. It's like, you know, we can acknowledge that somebody has harmed us, and we can acknowledge that, but we can also acknowledge that that doesn't, again, it doesn't exist within like a vacuum. It doesn't happen within a vacuum. And sometimes, you know, harm just comes from like letting things just go unchecked, you know? So I just wanted to add that to the discussion.
Thank you, Renee. Okay. Any questions?
I have a quick question, and it'll probably be a quick answer. So I'm looking at the backgrounds for Linda Small, Victoria Scott, Leo Hilton. So I totally forgot Victoria was even incarcerated, and I couldn't tell because Linda Small's background looks like you're sitting in the room with Leo. It's my camera's off. It looks like you're sitting in the room with Leo, but I just want to, for clarity, you're not incarcerated and formerly were.
No, I am not. I am formally incarcerated, and part of the reasons why I sit in this space with a lot of the Zoom meetings is my little tiny way of solidarity with those folks who are still incarcerated. But absolutely, yeah, I am on the outside now. I just got off home confinement program with corrections. But thank you for noticing that. Appreciate it.
All right. Leo, are we ready for breakout rooms?
We are ready for breakout rooms. So they're all set up and ready to go. And it is okay. You are among friends here. I don't care if you don't know the people in the room. They will be your friends shortly. You're very much among people of like mind. And so please stick around and engage, because this is where the opportunities come to engage on a little bit of a deeper level. And so we have 4 questions. Don't feel pressured to address all of them. Go by how you feel moved within your particular group. Asking, in what ways have you witnessed or experienced the carceral state outside of prisons or jails? What can you do to transform spaces you occupy into areas of place-based hope? How have you experienced or witnessed hope as a survival mechanism? And what can you do to help ensure rights for all in the world around you? So, with that, I see you, Colonel.
Oh, quick question. They change them all the time. So I see the questions in the chat. Is that going to follow us into the breakout rooms, or is it going to vanish magically and we won't remember what the questions are?
It may vanish magically.
Ooh,
Well, I'm going to copy them.
Yeah,
will
just
encourage
copy
you,
and
each of you,
paste is a safe way to go.
All right.
copy them and be ready to paste them, because as one of you, at least one person in each room will actually have the ability.
Yeah.
So with that,
All
I'll
right.
make sure that all
Copy and paste complete.
Yep, so take a moment. I'll give you a moment before I open the rooms to do your copying. And for our panelists, we are open to float back and forth between rooms. And let's come back together. Sadly, time is short. So if we can just start the conversation. So if we can have 10 minutes and come back at 6:30, and let's
And
go.
do some blending. Yeah. All right. Don't be scared. These freak out. These freak me out. Don't put me in a room.
And so Patricia and Lane, you are good. I was not able to not put you in a room.
So are we? So Leo, we're probably all back, yeah? Maybe those of us who are.
We are back.
All right. So if somebody from the would just bring some clarity to how you all, what was your process and what were some of the things you discussed, although it's very brief, in your particular rooms that we could all explore together. What did you talk about? Linda?
Yes. Me, Linda, or Linda Small?
You, Linda.
Hi, Dr.
You
Malden. I'm sorry I've been out of touch. I'm doing healing work. I'm back to work and I'm enjoying it. And I really feel that I'm healing people. I learned a lot about the prison system in Maine, and I am most joyful at the hope that Carrie gave me in teaching me about how things work there. And despite setbacks, she is moving forward with working on a degree and hopeful for a future. I can personally relate with my own brother, who gave up hope and gave up any belief that he could ever recover from drugs and alcohol, and he passed away. So a lot of those sorrowful feelings bring me to this room that you and I have talked about before, because he was incarcerated for a time and he really belonged in a mental health facility. So I am feeling joy that people in the system in Maine are hopeful and fighting for a future, and I applaud them. That was something that was denied to my brother, and I applaud everyone that is fighting for their future.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Other comments? Yes, Doug?
No comment. I was just giving Linda a thumbs up.
Oh, thumbs up from Doug.
Thank you.
All right. Other comments? Or thoughts? Doug?
All right. Nobody's gonna go. Y'all gonna make me talk again.
Right.
I'll keep it short, Dan. I see you there. We talked about a few things in the room. One of the things, the question that talked about using hope as a survival mechanism. We have seen that. I've seen it in here, working in the law library, the guys that want to file motions that may not have a good chance of success. And rather than tell them that, I just help them file their motion, because sometimes that's what keeps the guys going when they get up in the morning, is the hope that something's going to happen in the court. And also, one of the people in the room had talked about having a family member that had been incarcerated, and that the lawyers will just keep feeding the hope to you. Let's file a habeas corpus. Let's go to federal. And that hope is it's a cruel mistress, but keeps you going. And so that was the third question we had addressed on that. And with that, I will pass it to Dan. I know time's short.
Thanks.
Thank you, Doug. Just wanted to talk briefly about how someone mentioned in my group how incarceration or stuff like that prison can be a prison of the mind, right? It doesn't necessarily always mean being in a carceral setting, because we are sometimes, unfortunately, just as quick to put bars and limits on ourselves as other people. And how, if we can't navigate that, like how sometimes, and I'm gonna mention it later on tonight, but sometimes you have to be in a situation where you have less so you can find more. And just what that looks like in conjunction with hope, right? How do you find more hope in situations where you have more restrictions?
Okay, I look forward to that. Thank you. Other comments or questions or concerns or things you would like to have a short discussion about? So, in terms of hope, the idea of it, the framing of it, the shaping of it, can you feel that kind of work happening within yourself? And we'll take the hand first. Catherine?
Thanks, Patricia. I'm really interested in a point that Tori brought up in her, of all the three speeches, all three were so brilliant. It was just like, I felt like my heart just like expanding at every word. But Tori, you talked about how hope lives right next to faith. And I'm wondering if the three of you, the three panelists, might talk about the relationship between hope and faith, because I found myself realizing that for me, hope and faith, I think of them as the same thing. And so I'm wondering if for the three of you, do you disarticulate them? And if so, how? What specifically is the difference for you between hope and faith?
For me, I think that it's a progression. So it's almost like on the same continuum. And that's what I mean by next door. It feels almost spectral to me. And I think that faith is a slightly more grounded and confident sensation after hope has kind of grown, where you just have this deep assurance that things are going to be okay, even if they're not okay right now, even if everything is terrible and the world is ending. You have faith that everything that is happening exactly as it should, and that you will come through it. And I kind of perceive hope, I guess, as the light that first comes alive in that darkness. And as it grows in strength, it becomes more. It becomes faith. It becomes strength. It becomes salvation. It becomes, as Colonel said so perfectly, trust. Because eventually that's an unshakable confidence that everything will work out for the ultimate good, for the higher good of whatever it is. And whether that's God or a spiritual connection for you, and like Leo, for me it is. I'm founded in that trust and that faith, but it started with hope. That was the seed.
Thank you.
And for me, of course, I go to scripture, Hebrews 11:1, that faith is the evidence of things hoped for, evidence of things not seen. I can't even remember the scripture anymore. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So faith is the tangible, that thing that you carry with you, and that sustains you. Hope is the intangible, right? Where there is no expectation, and faith is the expectation, the trust, as Tori so rightfully said, the trust that what you have hope in will come to being.
I'm going to have to give this some deeper thought, but just for now, for me, hope is more of an action. That hope is how I move through the world and how I approach situations and how I approach people. And faith for me is just this larger knowing that the universe is on the side of justice. And it might not be right in this little moment or my tiny corner of the world, but in the big picture, faith is that the universe is on the side of justice. That's how I think of it. And then hope is how I move through that. I move through the world, hopefully. And that's the difference. But that's such a great question. Such great questions today. Thank you. I'm going to have to be doing a lot. I won't sleep at all tonight. These will all be running through these will all be running through my head, everything that everybody said. So brilliant. Thank you.
So with that, we are over time. And so with deep gratitude to our panelists, Victoria Scott, Linda Small, and yours truly. Thank you for showing up and engaging in just this deep and rich conversation. I would like to close with what has become, or is fast becoming, my favorite quote. It's by Oscar Arias, who said, "Hope is the strongest driving force for a people. Hope, which brings about change, which produces new realities, is what opens our road to freedom." One more time, and carry this with you. I'll leave it in the chat. Hope is the strongest driving force for a people. Hope, which brings about change, which produces new realities, is what opens our road to freedom. And so as we step into our third and final session this evening at 7, we'll have a bit of a break with some more music. And may we step into our next session with hope moving forward. So thank you each for showing up, and I hope to see you soon.